Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Wikipedia audio. The United States Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act is a set of laws passed by Congress in 1938 giving authority to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to oversee the safety of food, drugs, and cosmetics. A principal author of this law was Royal S. Copeland, a three-term U.S. Senator from New York. In 1968, the Electronic Product Radiation Control provisions were added to the FD&C. Also in that year the FDA formed the Drug Efficacy Study Implementation to incorporate into FD&C regulations the recommendations from a National Academy of Sciences investigation of effectiveness of previously marketed drugs. The Act has been amended many times, most recently to add requirements about bioterrorism preparations. The introduction of this act was influenced by the death of more than 100 patients due to a sulfanilamide medication where diethylene glycol was used to dissolve the drug and make a liquid form. It replaced the earlier Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. The FDC Act has 10 chapters. Contents. The FD&C is perhaps best known by the consumer because of its use in the naming of food coloring additives, such as FD&C Yellow No. 6. The Act made the certification of some food color additives mandatory. Some food colorings are generally recognized as safe by the FDA and do not require certification. The FDA lists 9 FD&C certified color additives for use in foods in the United States, and numerous D&C colorings allowed only in drugs for external application or cosmetics. Color additives derived from natural sources, such as vegetables, minerals, or animals, and artificial counterparts of natural derivatives, are exempt from certification. Both artificial and naturally derived color additives are subject to rigorous standards of safety before their approval for use in foods. Class I – devices that do not require pre-market approval or clearance but must follow general controls. Dental floss is a Class I device. Class II – devices that are cleared using the 510 process. Diagnostic tests, cardiac catheters, hearing aids, and dental amalgams are examples of Class II devices. Class III – devices that are approved by the pre-market approval process, analogous to a new drug application. These tend to be devices that are permanently implanted into a human body or may be necessary to sustain life. An artificial heart meets both criteria. The most commonly recognized Class III device is an automated external defibrillator. Devices that do not meet either criterion are generally cleared as Class II devices. There are also D&C colors that are only approved for use in pharmaceuticals for external application and cosmetics. The FDCO requires producers of food additives to demonstrate to a reasonable certainty that no harm will result from the intended use of an additive. If the FDA finds an additive to be safe, the agency issues a regulation specifying the conditions under which the additive may be safely used. A shortened definition of food additive is defined by the FDA as any substance the intended use of which results or may reasonably be expected to result, directly or indirectly, in its becoming a component or otherwise affecting the characteristic of any food, if such substance is not GRAS or sanctioned prior to 1958 or otherwise excluded from the definition of food additives. The full definition can be found in Section 201 of the FD&C Act, which provides for any additional exclusions. Homeopathic preparations are regulated and protected under Sections 201 and 201, provided that such medications are formulated from substances listed in the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States, which the Act recognizes as an official drug compendium. However, under separate authority of FTC Act, the Federal Trade Commission declared in November 2016 that homeopathic products cannot include claims of effectiveness without competent and reliable scientific evidence. If no such evidence exists, they must state this fact clearly on their labeling, and state that the product's claims are based only on 18th-century theories that have been discarded by modern science. Durham-Humphrey Amendment, Public Law 82-215 created prescription-only status for some drugs. Drug Efficacy Amendment PL 87-781, Vitamin Mineral Amendment prohibited the FDA from establishing standards to limit the potency of vitamins and minerals in food supplements or regulating them as drugs based solely on their potency. Medical Device Amendments of 1976 PL 94-295, Infant Formula Act of 1980, PL 96-359, Orphan Drug Act, PL 97-414, Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act of 1984, PL 98-417, Prescription Drug Marketing Act of 1987, PL 100-293, Generic Animal Drug and Patent Term Restoration Act of 1988, PL 100-670, Nutrition Labeling and Education Act of 1990, PL 101-535, Safe Medical Device Amendments of 1990, PL 101-629, Medical Device Amendments of 1992, PL 102-300, Prescription Drug User Fee Act of 1992, PL 102-571, Animal Medicinal Drug Use Clarification Act of 1994, PL 103-396, Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, PL 103-417, Food Quality Protection Act of 1996, PL 104-170, Animal Drug Availability Act of 1996, PL 104-250, Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, PL 107-109, Medical Device User Fee and Modernization Act of 2002, PL 107-250, Animal Drug User Fee Act of 2003, PL 108-130, Pediatric Research Equity Act of 2003, PL 108-155, Minor Use and Minor Species Animal Health Act of 2004, Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004, PL 108-282, FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, Generic Drug User Fee Amendment of 2012. Bottled water is regulated by the FDA as a food. The agency has published identity standards for types of water, and regulations covering water processing and bottling, water quality and product labeling. This act defines cosmetics as articles intended to be rubbed, poured, sprinkled, or sprayed on, introduced into, or otherwise applied to the human body, for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or altering the appearance. Under the Act, the FDA does not approve cosmetic products, but because the Act prohibits the marketing of adulterated or misbranded cosmetics in interstate commerce, it can remove cosmetics from the market that contain unsafe ingredients or that are mislabeled. The FDA can and does inspect cosmetics manufacturing facilities to ensure that cosmetics are not adulterated. Biologics Control Act of 1902, Federal Food and Drugs Act of 1906, Federal Meat Inspection Act, Federal Trade Commission Act, Filled Milk Act, Import Milk Act, Public Health Service Act, Trademark Act of 1946, Reorganization Plan 1 of 1953, Poultry Products Inspection Act, Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, Controlled Substances Act, Controlled Substances Import and Export Act, Egg Products Inspection Act, Lead-Based Paint Poisoning Prevention Act, Federal Advisory Committee Act, Government in the Sunshine Act, Government Patent Policy Act of 1980, Federal Anti-Tampering Act, Sanitary Food Transportation Act, Food and Drug Administration Revitalization Act, Mammography Quality Standards Act, Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act, Bioterrorism Act of 2002, Project BioShield Act of 2004, Food and Drug Administration Amendments Act of 2007, Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Reauthorization Act of 2013 PUBL 113.5. Food coloring. On May 28, 1976, the FD&C Act was amended to include regulation for medical devices. The amendment required that all medical devices be classified into one of three classes. For devices that were marketed prior to the amendment and were classified as Class 3, the amendment obligated the FDA to review the device to either reclassify it as a Class 2 device subject to pre-market notification, or to require the device manufacturer to undergo the pre-market authorization process and prove the safety and efficacy of the device in order to continue marketing it. Notable examples of such pre-amendment devices are those used for electroconvulsive therapy, which the FDA started reviewing in 2011. Section 510 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act requires those device manufacturers who must register to notify FDA, at least 90 days in advance, of their intent to market a medical device. This is known as Pre-Market Notification (PMN) or 510. It allows FDA to determine whether the device is equivalent to a device already placed into one of the three classification categories. Thus, new devices that have not been classified can be properly identified. Any device that reaches market via a 510 notification must be substantially equivalent to a device on the market prior to May 28, 1976. If a device being submitted is significantly different, relative to a pre-1976 device, in terms of design, material, chemical composition, energy source, manufacturing process, or intended use, the device nominally must go through a pre-market approval, or PMA. This does not always happen. A device that reaches market via the 510 process is not considered to be approved by the FDA. Nevertheless, it can be marketed and sold in the United States. They are generally referred to as cleared or 510 cleared devices. A 2011 study by Drive Diana Zuckerman and Paul Brown of the National Research Center for Women and Families, and Dr. Stephen Neeson of the Cleveland Clinic, published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, showed that most medical devices recalled in the last 5 years for serious health problems or death had been previously cleared by the FDA using the less stringent, and cheaper, 510 process. In a few cases the devices had been deemed so low risk that they did not need FDA regulation. Of the 113 devices recalled, 35 were for cardiovascular issues. This may lead to a re-evaluation of FDA procedures and better oversight. Certifiable colors. Food additives. Pre-market approval is the most stringent type of device marketing application required by FDA. Unlike the 510 pathway, the maker of the medical device must submit an application to the FDA and must receive approval prior to marketing the device. Definition of food additive. Homeopathic medications. Bottled water. Cosmetics. Medical devices. The PMA application contains information about how the medical device was designed and how it is manufactured, as well as preclinical and clinical studies of the device, demonstrating that it is safe and effective for its intended use. Because the PMA requires a clinical trial, it is significantly more expensive than a 510(7). The Wheeler-Lee Act, passed in 1938, granted the Federal Trade Commission the authority to oversee advertising of all products regulated by FDA, other than prescription drugs. Descriptions of these can be found at the FDA's website. Pre-market notification, PMN. Amendments. Other laws. Some U.S. states have adopted the FD&C Act as an equivalent state law and will by default adopt any changes to the federal law as changes to the state law as well. Pre-market approval. Related legislation. Significant amendments and related laws. Comparison to state laws.